Dogman, Spies on me. Dear Scary Stories NYC. I thought it was Bigfoot, but it turns out I have a tall, scary-looking dogman stalking me on my own property. And when I leave the property, apparently, so does the strange dog-headed man. I had felt a presence in the woods behind our newish retirement home in Kentucky ever since my wife and I bought the place just before the bug-demic. She chose this house above all the others that we looked at because she found it free of spirits. She's the sensitive one in our family, and yet I was the one who first knew deep in my belly that there was a cryptid of some sort out there behind our property. As I have already mentioned, I jumped to the conclusion that this was a Sasquatch because they have the reputation of being able to hide in plain sight and observe you while you don't even notice them. I had no proof or even evidence, but I knew somehow that I wasn't alone when I was strolling through those backwoods. And then, one evening, I finally caught sight of it. And it wasn't a Bigfoot at all. I was getting in a little evening constitutional before it would soon be too dark to walk the forest path. I began to feel that sensation of being watched, and then something caught my eye to my left. It was eyeshine looking at me. Someone's eyes were peering out at my eyes from the darkness, but the second I turned to meet the gaze, the eyes slid back behind a tree, just as they do in stories of Bigfoot. Freezing to the spot, I kept my eyes locked on that tree. Either I imagined that or I didn't, but if it was real, it would probably peek out at me again sooner or later if I waited long enough. So, I just stood still and waited. My eyes grew more accustomed to the darkness, and I noticed more details of the woods around me and behind the tree. And this time, when those eyes snuck another peek at me, I noticed the silhouette of the head, which I had not seen before. The second peek was far shorter than the first one, but since I was prepared for it, I made it count for a lot more. The trouble was, by doing this, I had ascertained without question that I was only about 18 to 25 feet away from a dog-headed, primitive man. Maybe that's not the best way to describe it, since I've since become certain that this creature has lupine or canine legs with paws, not human-style feet. Its front legs, however, seem to have evolved in a human or at least ape-like fashion. They were used to pick things up, carry things, and so forth, and so would more properly be called arms than front legs. The paws were very nearly hand-like, although when I was in the presence of the beast, I was more impressed with the length of the claws on those hands than the opposable thumbs. I could vividly imagine what it might feel like to be attacked by claws as long and sharp as those, and I began slowly moonwalking out of this situation. I never took my eyes off the dogman as I backed away in super slow motion. I knew that the backwoods really did have at least one strange presence in it. Dogs and wolves are social animals, so I wondered how many of those dogmen were out there in that forest. That was when I resolved to keep my walking limited to the brightest and sunniest parts of the day, and to stroll into town if I needed an evening constitutional. You can see the tree line of the backwoods from the windows in the little hallway to the private bathroom attached to the master bedroom in our house. I noticed this one night by accident while returning from a midnight trip to the head. We didn't have any lighting in the backyard at the time. It was only lit by some dim ambient lighting from the house and then the moon and the stars. Yet I noticed some other kind of light out there. I felt a sense of alarm because I initially thought that the light was coming from a flashlight and that we had a burglar in our woods. I really wanted to go back to bed, not deal with a burglar, but by then, my adrenaline was pumping and I was waking up. I stared out the window until I located what I had seen peripherally. It was worse than a prowler with a flashlight. It was that eye shine again. I tried to see it better, attempting to allow my eyes to adjust to the light as in the previous encounter, but I could not be certain that eye shine belonged to the Dogman. I ran to our bedroom and grabbed my phone, turning on my camera app. I would use the zoom on that thing to try to see the eye shine better, and maybe take a picture of it. By the time I got back to the spot, though, the eye shine was gone. It might have been an owl sitting on a branch for all I know, but from then on, I began to have that feeling of being watched sometimes at home as well. In my mind, at least, the Dogman seemed to be observing me almost all of the time. There was still lots of time when I did not have that feeling of being watched, and I was able to carry out my chores for my wife and so forth, but when I would move from one location to another, such as going from home to the supermarket, I would have that feeling that I was being watched and that I was being stalked. One afternoon, my wanderings took me into town where I discovered an old cemetery I hadn't noticed before. I was making note of the dates on the tombstones, which ranged from the 1800s to recent times, and I was shocked to find a name that was familiar to me. It was someone who I had studied under when I was young. I had no idea he had settled in this town and been buried here. I felt overwhelmed by the grief of learning of his death in this way, as well as the sheer chance of something like that happening. You know, retiring from work didn't make me feel old. Buying a retirement home itself didn't make me feel old either. But that moment in that strange cemetery, realizing I already knew somebody in there, realizing I already fit in and belonged in that graveyard, now that made me feel old. I remember my face going flush like I was blushing. I remember the shame of allowing life to pass by so quickly, not appreciating it as much as I always should have been doing. And then, in my self-pity, I gazed off into the trees inside that old cemetery, and I once again saw that eye shine. There he was, the Dogman, in broad daylight. Well, actually, he was in shadow, but it was a sunny day. It was as though night were intruding into the afternoon, as though it could coexist inside the daytime. He walked a step out from the tree line, boldly showing off his ability to go any place that he felt like going. I hadn't sensed I was being watched that time. He had dulled my senses to the point where I now was being watched so much, I never had the feeling of being watched any longer. I wondered if this apparent Dogman was acting upon instinct, or if he had thought through this behavior. I was noticing that he seemed to be sort of hypnotizing me, and I wondered how much of it was deliberate, and how much of it was just happening as a sort of a side effect. The creature shouldn't have known I would be in that cemetery on that day. It couldn't have followed me there as I walked down city streets where a Dogman could not walk. It had to have taken some other route, yet how did it know that the cemetery was my ultimate destination? I myself didn't even know that when I set out from home on that day. So how did the Dogman know? I could see his entire body lit by the daytime sun. No amount of illumination could prevent that thing from looking like it was a literal, physical part of night itself. Even at that great distance, I could see his long, deadly claws wrapping around a tree branch. I could clearly see his long, pointed wolf ears up on top of his lupine head. I could see its massive chest flex casually. I could make it out so clearly, I almost wondered if the creature were somehow being broadcast into my consciousness, or possibly broadcast into consciousness itself. I mean, into reality. Maybe he was projected into the world that we perceive as real. Sorry, I know that's a real sidetrack, but there were a lot of little annoying things about the Dogman that made me wonder if he really was just another ordinary physical canine type creature, you know? Regular dogs aren't usually one step ahead of the humans around them, but this monster dog was always 3 steps ahead of me. It was, for me personally, 10 times more frightening to know that he could be there, miles away from my home, still stalking me, no matter what time of day or night. I looked around, but there was nobody else close enough that I could point the Dogman out to. I reached for my phone, but the creature knew better than to wait around for me to take a snapshot. He just wanted me to know that he was there. He didn't want the entire world to know. It was around that time that I began leasing a Volvo. I wouldn't have chosen a Volvo, but I let my wife handle it for me. She has her own car, but I had traditionally walked or taken public transportation in the places we had lived before. That wasn't as practical any longer, hence the Volvo. I wanted to drive to other locations to take my walks. Locations where there were no dogmen to spy on me. We live a short drive from a medium-sized city, so I decided that would be my new place to get away to when I needed alone time. I want to make it clear that I had still not at this point in the story admitted to anyone else what was happening. As I said, my wife had declared the property free from negative influences, and I knew better than to contradict her on one of her readings. I had begun growing more and more distant from my friends during that period, as I felt too embarrassed to admit to any of them what was happening. And what was happening was that the Dogman had taken over my life, or that I had handed control over to him. Yes, he was at fault for harassing me, for staring at me, following me, haunting my very existence. But on the other hand, I was the one who had invited him to live rent-free inside my brain. Even on days when I didn't see him, I would look out windows and wonder if he was staring at me or not. One night, I lost sleep, staring out the back window through my cell phone, looking for the Dogman in the darkness. I was doing his job for him. After that bad night, I went to spend the day in the city, just to feel normal again. But even there, in the shadows, I could see him. Even in the city, even on a bright day, there are still dark places, and somehow the Dogman knows how to reach them. Turn a corner. There he was, peeking out at me. Walk away and see those eyes staring at me from the corner of my eye. As soon as I would turn my head, of course, he would pull back into hiding. I would only see him long enough to know he was there, to be certain I wasn't paranoid. Even in the city here, there are, I think, multiple Dogmen lurking at the edges of the everyday reality of normal people. There are so many of us who don't realize how close we are to having our reality paradigms utterly shattered into shards and dust. There are so many of us who have no idea that we are so close to these creatures of the eternal night. And most of us may never find out. But once you understand that these creatures can be any place they choose to be, once you grasp that their intelligence is nothing at all like human intelligence, you will find yourself plunged into a new and far harsher reality than they taught you in school books. Every alley I passed, each dark street, there were those same glowing eyes peering out at me from the darkness. Was that him? I thought I saw him again. How could he have gotten into that alley? Wait, was that the Dogman in that park? The entire day was like that, with the Dogman occupying most of my attention. That experience caused me to feel more fragile than I ever had before, and more exposed as well. I invited some friends to come and stay at our house since the empty bedrooms were making me feel even more completely alone. I know I'm married, but the Dogman is not a subject I can talk about with my wife. It just isn't. I'm stressed out enough about it. I don't need to be lectured by her and have my fears downplayed. The Dogman scares me. His stalking me scares me. His watching me scares me too. Is he just doing it to be evil? To freak me out? Or is he spying on me, studying me, learning about me, for some future purpose? Is he collecting this information to use against me in some way? What does he plan to do? And why me anyway? Once I had friends staying at our place. They noticed how my behavior had changed. I was constantly checking out the windows to see if I was being watched and so forth and so on. Eventually, I just told them the truth, which initially delighted them. They thought the idea that there was a werewolf wandering around the neighborhood was sort of exotic and exciting. It was like a party game to them, and that was fine with me. Having people around for company helped me to begin to remember what it felt like to be safe. I've resolved to only go out places with my friends from now on, so this way I can point out the Dogman to them and see if they can see it too. The problem is that every time I go out with someone else, the Dogman won't show his dog face. Now it's harder to get friends to stay over. Almost nobody ever wants to walk or drive anywhere with me anymore because I'm always looking over my shoulder for that monster. One person even told me that I've become spookier than the Dogman itself. I'm afraid to go out. I just want to sit at home with the shades drawn and the doors locked. And it's all because Dogman spies on me. We hope you enjoyed this program, and now here's a preview of our next episode. The snarling Dogman moved in closer, drool dripping off his tongue. Judging by his eyes, he was thinking what a good meal I would make. I could smell his hot, rotten breath, and I remember feeling like I was about to lose my life in a painting by Hieronymus Bosch. I was in a horror film with some sort of naked werewolf about to chew my face off as an appetizer. And then, as my life flashed in front of my eyes and tears streamed down my cheeks, the Dogman moved in, and I accepted that my life was about to have its last paragraph written. Suddenly, the creature jerked backward, its face looking confused and in pain. Why had it moved so abruptly and so oddly? Sitting up to get a better view, I saw that the Dogman, the impossible-to-defeat cryptid monster who had been about to devour me alive, had a giant hand around his throat. That giant hand was at the end of a long, giant, hairy arm, and when I saw that the arm was attached to a big, hairy man with extremely large feet, I realized I was in the presence of the old man of the mountain. That Dogman now had a much bigger problem than me on its hands. That Dogman now had to deal with Bigfoot. Bigfoot saved me from Dogman. That's tomorrow, Tuesday, right here on the Dogman Show. And speaking of Bigfoot, our executive producer has the name of Sexy. He's good, not bad, like the apoplexy. He's a member since forever. He's the one that sticks. He's Sexy Kojak 76. Please join me in thanking Sexy Kojak 76 for making this episode possible. In exchange, we share secret episodes with his sexiness on Wednesdays and Sundays. Plus, Sexy Kojak can check out our over 21 hours of archived secret uncensored stories anytime he feels like it. And so can you. Just join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com, or else click that join link under this or any of our videos to become a channel member. And now, international TV spokesdog Henry Lee Dogman is gonna come back and fill in more deets. Hank? Thanks for watching till the end. If you liked what you saw, please consider clicking like on the video or sharing it with your friends and family that you think might also be interested. If you would like to see more of our work, please consider subscribing and hitting that bell icon next to the subscribe button so that YouTube will alert you when we put out a new video. To become a channel member and gain access to our special perks, you can click that join link under each of our videos. Another option is to join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. You can join for as little as 99 cents on YouTube or $1.50 at peterbernard.com, and that gains you access to our weekly secret uncensored episodes. If you'd like to see our 21 hours of archives of uncensored Dogman stories, then please join at the $3 level or above. To get to watch our shows in advance of the public, please join at our $10 level. That gets you all the perks. If you join our channel memberships, you need to check our community page here on YouTube in order to get the links to the secret videos and other perks. If you're in the PayPal subscribers club, Peter will email you all the news and links himself. Once joining the PayPal club, which is Peter's homemade club, please give him a chance to see that you've joined and to compose you a personal welcome email, as none of that is automated. But whichever you join, we'll name you an executive producer for the next available episode. Do you have a scary experience that you'd like to share with us? You can email us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or call our Scary Stories voicemail hotline at 804-LA-SCARY. That's 804-537-2279. It's a Google voicemail box, so that means it keeps cutting off after every 3 minutes. If your story is longer than that, please keep calling back and we can piece it together on our end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.